Welcome back to another game of Legacy Gwent League here. This is the second match that we're going to be casting today, and it is Frailcoast versus J.Constantine. Both of the syndicates in this matchup have been banned, and we have Frailcoast with a Death Shadow living armor sort of thing going on. He has an Ardle 6, I believe. No, an Ardle 5, and
I think both players bought Armor 5.
and a Harmony as well on Frailcoast side, along with a band syndicate. And J.Constantine brought a Death Wish, which is Red Raim's Death Wish. We've seen that a lot on ladder, especially in previous weeks. A Ardle 5 once again, and a Dwarfs list. So our first matchup here is going to be Death Shadow not Death Shadow, the Bleed Boy. Bleed Boy.
Bloodcent.
Ah, that's the one. Bleed Boy versus Dwarves.
Yeah,
So let's
versus Mystic Echo Dwarfs. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this one goes. I mean, the Dwarf player, I believe, is favored in this matchup. However, Monsters, if it is able to get a good bleed down, excuse the pun, if it is able to bleed quite efficiently in round 2, the round 3 can be short enough where the Dwarf is not able to, get the full value of their synergies. And I believe that is what is going to be Frailcoast. Is strategy here is to try win round 2 and then bleed quite heavily in round 2 to make round 3 as short as possible for him.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. This Death Wish, this Blood Scent, I keep saying Death Wish, this Blood Scent list has all these tall units, and it's kind of similar to very early Homecoming lists with tall units that we saw with meta monster lists early on with Osril and all of that, except it's just a little bit more updated with a little bit more combo pieces and a lot more thinking.
I mean, it is a very interesting one. We don't normally see a Blood Scent deck quite like this with Troubadours and Living Armor. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm not very familiar with this type of deck, and I'm going to be quite curious to see how Frailcoast makes use of this this Living Armor. However, that being said, it is important to note that this Living Armor is going to be it's going to be interesting because the Troubadours play for very, very low tempo, meaning that when Frailcoast does play the Troubadours, it is going to potentially be a liability for him because it means he might have to get run. We do see the Troubadour come down now, which is a very, very low tempo play to make. Quite curious to see how that plans out because as you mentioned, he does need to win round 1, or at least I believe he wants to win round 1, but maybe he's got a different idea in mind.
Yeah, it's kind of comparable to how agitators work. We saw agitators were very popular several months ago in Scoia'tael lists when Skags was very good, and we see a really early pass coming out of Constantine here, maybe trying to play for that card advantage. And Frailcoast doesn't actually have a card that's able to tempo ahead here other than that Living Armor, and obviously he doesn't want to commit that because that Caranthier onto it is going to end up playing for 17 points.
He could commit a Goliath plus a leader charge that would tempo him ahead, and I think that is what he's going to go ahead here and do, is play the Goliath. The question is, will he play the leader ability, or will he just take the long round 3? I believe he probably is going to play a leader ability because I would imagine he wants to bleed here, and that is what we see him do. He's going to play leader ability to get that 1 extra point so that he does end up taking the round by 1, and I believe that means that he is obviously going to bleed round 2 because if you're not playing on bleeding round 2, you just take the 2 cards down and take the long round 3. So I imagine we will see a bleed come down here from Frailcoast.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. This actually ended up working out very well for Frailcoast here. Seems like he kind of gave up on that round 1 and just started playing those Troubadours, but Constantine, maybe with a bad hand or maybe even too good of a hand, decided that it wasn't worth playing into the bad cards that Frailcoast was playing, gave a really early pass and an opportunity for Frailcoast to tempo ahead there.
And very interesting enough, we see Frailcoast is running the Glusty as well, and it's not very synergistic with this deck due to the fact that there's not a whole lot of ones you can get on the board other than the ones that, such as the larvae, which you obviously don't want to be eating because that is not food, that is actually an engine that you want to preserve. So I'm quite curious to see how Frailcoast is going to make use of this Glusty. I do see he is running the Andrega Rainer, which does eat or consume a card and then gain its armor, and then every turn it damages itself by 1 while it has armor, and then spawns a 1-point Arachastrone, which can be potential Glusty fruit. But other than that, not a whole lot of ways that Frailcoast has of getting Glusty value on his own side of the board, at least.
That's the Endrega Queen for anybody that doesn't speak Spanish.
Oh, sorry, that's an all right. I believe I do have a Spanish list here, right? Endrega Queen, my bad. All right, so Endrega Queen, but yeah, other than that, not a whole lot of ways to get Glusty value. And we do see a Purify coming down onto the Defender. I believe that's only Purify in this matchup, right? I don't think Purify is going to be much use other than on that Defender anyway. But we do see the Constantine committing the Zoltan back. Both players not really committed that much to this round just yet. We haven't seen any of the big combo pieces come down until now. As I say that, now we see the Monroe come down. So now we're starting to see some commitment, and it looks like Constantine is now threatening card advantage. And how bad would it be, theoretically, for Frailcoast to actually just go a card down here, which I believe he's going to do, considering he's playing the weaker bronzes he had in his hand right now?
Well, I imagine he's going to be okay with it, considering that he's going to end up with a 17-point Caranthier and a 14-point Living Armor, as well as potentially some pretty decent Glusty value, especially if he's able to line up anything on his opponent's board. But looking at the list, he doesn't really have a way to line up ones, other than obviously the bleeding. But still, it's kind of like the big monsters philosophy of smork the round 2, get a short round 3, and just have really big units and win even a card down.
Right. Is it a 17-point Crundy? Doesn't Crundy just copy the base stats of the card?
I have no idea. I would assume that's really the only reason you would ever run Troubadours.
I'm not sure. I'm actually quite curious now, because I'm not 100% sure how that interaction works. But we do see Frailcoast, considering if you want some mulligan with his Heatwave not actually particularly good in this matchup due to the fact that Dwarfs doesn't go very tall, and Heatwave is generally more of a tall punish type of card. It just doesn't do a whole lot against Dwarfs. You can kill off a low engine, but you're basically playing like a glorified Zap at that point. So not really going to find that much value in a Dwarf matchup. But we do see a lot of common pieces. I'm be curious to see how he makes use of this Endrega Queen.
I guess he's going to go for here how this works.
Yeah, it's going to be quite interesting to see how this combo pieces unfold.
Okay, it does look like it only pulls the base stats.
Yeah, so it's a 13-point Karante, which is still not bad. You're playing a 13 for 8. Although
really weird decision to play the Troubadours, though. Those are only playing 6 for 4.
I mean, yeah, they are playing for some carryover, I guess. But, they have some synergy with the Endrega Queen, I suppose. But, yeah, it is a very strange lineup we do see out of Frailcoast. And now we do see the Queen come down, which is going to put a bunch of ones on his sideboard for Glusty. However, this is open deckless, so I imagine Constantine will understand that he should be killing the ones to deny Glusty value, which I would imagine is going to happen here.
Yeah, that would definitely be something that I would expect. Constantine has all sorts of pings. I can't imagine Glusty's going to end up doing very much here. Unless
Frailcoast can line up an offensive Glusty at some point. I mean, all he needs to do is eat one card of his opponent, and it's already playing 9 for 9. If you can eat 2, it's basically playing 12 for 9. So, I mean, if you can find 2 targets, it's not bad, but it is going to be quite a setup to actually achieve that value.
We see the Royal Decree to grab into that Toad Prince to obviously eat that mercenary there. And maybe some Blood Scent commitment to start these bleeds ticking down to maybe try to get that those 1-point units like you've been talking about to get that Glusty value.
Unfortunately, looking at that Royal Decree, there were a lot of golds in Frailcoast deck. He did miss quite a few of his important cards, so but unfortunate on the draws there for Frailcoast, missing his Oriana and a few other golds. But he is going to be up with a very big play to make with that Living Armor still, and we can see an offensive Glusty next turn. It's going to be able to eat 2 of his opponent's dwarfs. However, it's not going to quite play for 12 points because it is also denying 2 of his own bleeding. So basically 10 points. However, it's also denying 1 turn earlier of his opponents getting dwarf ping. So maybe it actually is still a 12-point play.
Yeah, and perhaps even we see one of these ones actually sticking on the board if Constantine doesn't decide to deal with this one that's hanging out, this Arrakis drone. We see a commitment onto the company.
Yeah, that means okay, yeah, that means the one will stick. He doesn't kill the drone there. I'm quite surprised he didn't, although
The one was
the
supposed to stick, but good old Berserker came through.
yeah, the Berserker had something different in mind. So I guess the one does die, and then we do see the 12-point Glusty come down, which is not bad at all, considering that there's not much synergy in this deck, and considering the lack of synergy, still can have quite a few points. Not bad, and we do see a 12-point Zoltan get answered right back, and it looks like Constantine needs to do a
Oh boy,
six.
it's a tie. It's a game
Wait.
one tie. Holy.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Huh. Already a tie. Well, that's going to be a very interesting one to rewatch, considering that Frailcoast actually definitely, I think, is happy about that because due to the fact that he actually missed a few goals. So that matchup could potentially go a lot better for Frailcoast, I believe.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I definitely wouldn't expect that to end up in a tie there. But anyways, let's zoom forward.
I guess that random ping made the difference.
True.
On the Berserker.
As well as the final random ping hitting a unit rather than armor. J.Constantine's RNG kind of bailing him out in that round, giving him a second opportunity to go on and win this.
All right, so we have a game reset, and looking in this hand, that's a very, very threatening looking hand. A lot of golds. He's got both of his Necrorats, which is quite scary, a very scary engine if left unchecked. Although, that being said, there is one card in, or should I say two cards in Constantine's deck that can deal very, very efficiently with these Necrorats, and that is a Skirmisher, which is a bronze card that deals 3 damage and can quite easily deal with the Necrorats.
Yeah, that is true. Not quite as good as something like a Swears or a Toad Prince at three damage removal, but still very efficient.
Well, I mean, it's a bronze card, so I mean, I guess you could say it deals with it efficiently enough as a bronze card. Although we do see a Skirmisher come down now early on the Andrega Larvae, which means this Necrorat actually might be able to stick unless Constantine drew the second Skirmisher. And let's see if he does. He does not, which means this Necrorat is actually going to stick, which is a very, very threatening engine if left unchecked, which it looks like it is going to be left unchecked right now.
Really early Urgen, rather than opting to develop the second Necrorat and get those engines going, Frailcoast decides to play this Urgen out to maybe set up that Glusty, or maybe try to get this Andrega Queen down. I'm not entirely sure.
Potentially wants to get the Andrega Queen and have a safer Jurgen down, because Jurgen's a very interesting. There's a couple of ways you can play it. You can either play it early on, just get the full armor value, make it harder to kill, or you can keep it in hand as a form of reach. Threaten your opponent with reach. So if you're down like, I don't know, 10 points or whatever, and your opponent passes, you can always just slam down a Jurgen and take the round. Although that being said, it is risky, because if you do end up keeping a Jurgen for very late, and you end up playing it like, let's say, when you have only 2 or 3 cards left in your hand, then it's going to be very, very easy for your opponent to kill, and it could be a big liability for you potentially.
Pretty lucky ping on the Berserker there for Frailcoast. Hitting the Egern armor is going to end up being irrelevant on this turn because of this Queen. Doesn't take advantage of the Necrorat ping. Maybe a little bit of a misplay, or we'll see what is playing.
Yeah,
with this.
Can't imagine why you wouldn't use that over there. Unless there's something that he's gotten in. I mean, this could potentially backfire if all those pings hit the Necrorat.
Oh, no.
Which it does. Yeah, so that was a bit of a missight there from Frailcoast. He lost out on 2 points. It might not actually end up matching a whole lot, but I mean, 2 points is 2 points. So we'll have to see how much that impacts this round. We do see a defender coming down from Constantine, and I guess
okay, hold on.
Pretty much.
I just realized why he didn't do it. He's going to end up purifying this defender, and he couldn't have targeted before the defender.
Ah, I see. But does he still get at least 1 point of bleeding through then, at least?
He does.
So he still loses a point, I guess, but I guess I could see it. Okay, I guess there's a reason for it at least.
Forgetting about the defender, but yes, still misses 1 point. But obviously still has this second Necrorat if he does want to take advantage of that. And again, we see the Zoltan's company come down. Maybe with the intention of playing a ranged row Zoltan, that would be a very heavy commit.
Yeah, I mean that is a big commitment. But if it means that Constantine wins round 1 and gets his long round 3, it might be worth it for him because as we saw when he did get bled, the short round, even though he was up a card in the last game, the short round was very losable for Constantine. So maybe this time he's going for a more aggressive approach in round 1, try take control of the game, get his long round 3, and try get the full dwarf synergies going in a long round.
Frailcoast is still threatening a win on even here, though. He's been playing very big tempo, trying to force Constantine out of this round and allow him to bleed essentially for free, since losing a card in round 2 at that point would only mean going into even cards on round 3.
Yeah, I mean, he still has his Glusty, which is not going to be anything to scoff at. It is going to be able to eat one of his opponent's ones, and there's still 3 ones in his side of the board, which is getting more and more every turn with the Andrega Queen. So the Glusty is still threatening for quite a bit here in round 1, maybe as a round 1 finisher. Although that being said, he doesn't really have many other playable cards. I can't imagine he wants to play his Orion on this board state, and I don't think he wants to play Caranthia either on this board state. So in looking at Frailcoat's hand, he doesn't have that much playable cards in his hand. Basically, just this Glusty, maybe the Necrot, and then he's probably going to have to look to pass or either force his opponent out or pass, one of the two.
And that Ranger Zoltan does end up coming through off of that Call of the Forest. 4 Rowdy Dwarves getting buffed up for a whole lot of points there. And luckily
14 points, Zoltan.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Luckily
and when he
for Constantine,
the
the pings go on to the 1s, preventing some additional Glusty value. But Frailcoast is still able to stay ahead with this Glusty. Not really able to continue to stay ahead here, though. But Constantine's been roping longer and longer, indicating that he feels less and less comfortable with committing the cards that he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting difficult for so obviously, we do see a Gabble. That's very, very interesting because now, how is Frailcoat going to contest this round? If he doesn't win this round, he's going to deal with carryover in round 2. And if he does push here, he's still going to have to deal with carryover in the next round, and he has to stay ahead here. If he doesn't stay ahead, his opponent can pass. He's going to have to commit something like Caranthia and then still deal with carryover in round 2. That's going to be very, very awkward from that. That Gabble timing was actually very, very well done from Constantine, putting Frailcoat in a very, very awkward position right now. And he is going to use the bleeding on the Gabble, obviously, as a form of carryover because the bleeding actually statuses do carry through to the next round. Meaning, if hypothetically both players were to pass here, that bleeding would carry over into next round. And he's using leader charges too to try to stay ahead, which I guess is still forcing Constantine to keep playing into this round, which he obviously decides to pass in response. And that gives Frailcoat the round upper card. Or should say uneven at least, but he is going to deal with this carryover in round 2, which can be very interesting to see how J.Constantine defends the bleed with the carryover.
Well, I imagine that the Detlef is rather happy here because he kind of, I would guess, is just giving up on this round 2 card advantage that he ended up getting and is just going to end up giving it back to the Dwarves player here. In favor of taking a very short round with hopefully a very high point ceiling with the Living Armor and the Caranthia and the Osril and these big units.
That is very true. However, unlike the last game, Frailcoat has not drawn Troubadours / Living Armor. I believe in an ideal situation for Frailcoat right now, he was hoping to find the Living Armor and some Troubadours, just play for some absolute carryover whilst bleeding as much as he can, which is not exactly what he's doing. He's not really got a hand that does very well with carryover. These cards left in his hand are pretty high value. He does get a just of his opponent, so he is getting some value through this bleed, but he's not able to play for carryover, which, I mean, this bleed could have been very, very bad for Constantine if Frailcoat was able to draw a Troubadour or 2 plus Living Armor.
Yeah, that would have caused Constantine quite a bit of problems. Will we end up seeing this Heatwave commit? Like we said in the last game that ended up getting tied, this Heatwave doesn't actually find a lot of value most of the time, but Frailcoast does decide to hold on to it. I guess it can hit that tree. That can play for a couple points here.
Yeah, it could play an Oak, although due to the fact that it's open deckless, I imagine that Constantine will try to play that Oak for maximum damage, meaning that it will only be an 8-point heatwave at most if he is playing around the heatwave. Constantine, or Frailcoast rather, does miss 3 golds again, and pretty important ones. He does not find the Ozril or the Toad Prince, and I believe Living Armor is also in deck, and those are all pretty valuable cards here. Unfortunately, he missed all 3 of them, and that's pretty unfortunate for him because those 3 golds are playing for a lot of points.
Maybe his backup Caranther target is going to end up being this Orianna, but at this point, this Caranther is looking a bit sad.
Yeah, this Caranthea definitely not having the ideal targets available. Although, I mean, I guess Caranthea on a or is actually can get and go through. It can be a lot of points, but Orianna coming down for 1 point on the board does make it very, very vulnerable to a lot of things. And I mean, Frailcoast's hand just this time not quite looking as potent as the last game. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to have enough points yet to take this one.
Yeah, I suppose we'll see. We were surprised by the last game. Let's see if this game surprises us as well.
Yeah, I guess that is very, very true. But what is Frailcoast going to... I mean, imagine... Do you ever just heatwave one of these mercenaries at this point? I mean, the removal, they're going to get a lot of points.
I mean, maybe. That doesn't feel very good at all.
Yeah, I mean, you're playing a Temper Vision, Tourney Just, or Zap at that point, but I mean, you're going to find better value.
Yeah, maybe those cards do represent more value than a tree body, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very awkward for Frailcoast here. I mean, if he found the Toad Prince or Ozril at least, it would have been much better for him. But he is going to go with the Caranthea onto the Orianna, which is going to play for 7 points of immediate value. But I imagine the Orianna should always die here.
Oh, she actually lives because Constantine goes for the Purify rather than playing a Dwarf, allowing this Orianna to live for 1 additional turn, and the second Orianna to get developed and put extra bleeding down on the board.
Yeah, that's an interesting one from yeah, that is very, very interesting from Constantine. I mean, does that maybe mean he doesn't have Oak either? Because I mean, Oak could also just kill an Orianna pretty easily if you chose to, but he decides perhaps either he doesn't want to kill it or we didn't draw Oak.
Yeah, that's definitely a very interesting choice. I don't remember if we've seen Zoltan, but the guard comes down for not a lot of points there. Only 5-point guard, obviously giving extra mercenary ticks.
And this both these Orianna still sticking.
Yeah, this game is turning into an actual close one. I didn't actually expect this to happen. Again, we're getting surprised.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I mean, both Orianna sticking is not something I would have originally thought would happen. It looks like Constantine has given up trying to kill the first Orianna, and he is now decided to start chipping away at the second Orianna. What he's going to take us with the Zora Crag? He's going to take an Ozril, most likely. It is playing for 14 points. Yeah, so I guess the Ozril does come down, and now it is Oak versus Heatwave potentially, and I think the Heatwave actually wins in this situation.
He is up by 10 points. Wow.
Yeah. And looks like, yeah, there comes the Oak, and the Heatwave is going to be enough to take it. So actually, Frailcoast taking this game, I did not actually expect it. That game really, if you asked me 5 turns earlier who was going to win, I would have said Constantine, but it seems like Frailcoast actually managed to take that series. Very well played by Frailcoast there.
Yeah, that was super surprising. I did not see that happening at all. In both of those first 2 games. Wow.
Yep.
All right, so we're back again with this game 3, or game 2, technically. Although the first one went on for 2 games, and it's going to end up being an Ardal versus a Mystic Echo here. How do you think this one's going to end up going, seeing Frailcoast Ardal?
I think that Dwarfs is generally favored, especially on this lineup of, or this build of Ardal, looking at Frailcoast's list. But there are a lot of tipping points that the Nilfgaard player can potentially run away with the game. If the opponent doesn't have access to the Purify and the defender goes through, then Ardal can do all kinds of nasty things with their leader ability, Damien, Stefan, bribery, all kinds of things can go very, very wrong. But that being said, I think for the most part, the matchup is generally favored for the Dwarf player. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of ways it can just completely spiral out of control if a few things go wrong.
And interestingly here, we see Frailcoast playing a Tourney Shalmar, which isn't very common in a lot of these lists. And that definitely has the potential against dwarves to end up getting a lot of points, given that there's quite a few dwarf cards like the Defender and Zoltan that spam lots of opponents' units onto your own board, up to 3 a lot of the time, and potentially this Tourney Shalemar can play for a whole lot of points.
Yeah, Dwarfs is definitely one of the better matchups for Tony Shelmar. There's a lot of swarm potential you can get with bribery, or even honestly, you can find some pretty good swarm cards with the diplomacies, because you can find things like neophytes. You can find things like this machine. I can't remember the name of it. The machine chariot. That's the one. The chariot. There's a lot of cards you can find off the creates that can get a lot of swarm potential, and the more that you are able to swarm the board with opponents' units, the more value Shelmar will get. 2 points per unit for that reason.
Yeah, this Tourney Shalemar could definitely end up representing a lot of points for Frailcoast side, but I would definitely agree it's going to be an uphill battle for Frailcoast here. Dwarfs is pretty strong, especially in this patch.
Yeah, and as you mentioned in the past, Nilfgaard is not very well equipped to deal with decks that go very wide. They have a lot of good single removal cards, but not a whole lot of good wide removal cards. And Dwarfs is the kind of deck that goes very, very wide, and Nilfgaard is not the kind of deck that is very well equipped to deal with decks that go wide.
And we see a really early pass from J.Constantine here, once again giving Frailcoast the capability of bleeding. We kind of saw this happen in the very first game, where Constantine gave up the round 1 very easily and allowed himself to get bled. And we'll see how this Ardle ends up working out for Mr. Frailcoast here in this upcoming bleed, and how exactly he's going to end up taking this round, even enabling his bleed, because looking at it, it's actually going to be kind of difficult to make this 10 points of tempo to give him the option to bleed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see a good way for Frailco to actually get ahead here in 1, which means that this is a pretty good pass by Constantine. I think Constantine saw this gap and he said to himself, if I pass here, I don't think you can do it in 1. And if you can't do it in 1, it means you can't bleed me in round 2. And if you can't bleed me in round 2, I'm getting a long round 3. And a long round 3 is pretty good for Dwarfs. So pretty good pass from Constantine there, identifying that his opponent did not have the reach to take it in 1 there, and punishing his opponent by taking the early pass and forcing him to go 2 cards down, meaning that he does secure the long round 3.
Opting to hold on to the Triss and commit the Menno, whereas hypothetically, if that same diplomacy roll hit with that Triss, it would have actually been enough tempo to give Frailcoast the bleed here.
Yeah, I guess it was a risky decision, because if he does commit the Triss and it doesn't get him ahead, then he's very, very sad about that. So I guess he's going for the safer play, and the minute does also thin his deck, but as you mentioned, it doesn't get him ahead. So he does take the card down, but it is the safer line of play, I guess you could say.
Hold the Impera Brigades, unfortunately. Frailcoast wants to be hitting those with the Artorias Vigo, but instead just opts to play them for thinning right now, rather than getting that Vigo value, and is obviously going to end up passing on 7 since he took the round 1 down 2 cards.
I mean, Vigo is still not terrible. You can play him without the brigades and he still can be decent. I don't believe, I'm looking at the list now, and it looks like Frailcoast is not running a Duchess, so it's not going to be quite as good as it could be. But Vigo is still not bad. Even if you play him onto like a 1-point diviner, he's still not terrible. You're putting 2 engines on the board. It's still okay. It's not terrible. But as you mentioned, you do miss out on a little bit of thinning, and it's a bit more tempered to obviously play the brigades with the Vigo in a deck like this.
Yeah, it is a little bit unfortunate when you don't have that secondary option of the Duchess. Usually the Impera Brigades indicate that the Nilfgaard player isn't running a Duchess, and Duchess is definitely the secondary choice right behind Brigades for most of these players when they're using Vigo.
And that's an early defender. That is very, very punishable. What potentially Frailcoast could do there is you could play leader onto the defender and then play like a Damien or something. But unfortunately for Frailcoast, he's not actually running Damien or Stefan. So I guess that is why Constantine is playing the defender early, because if Frailcoast were hypothetically running Stefan or Damien, what the Nilfgaard player could do is play leader ability, steal the defender, and then play their own Damien. But luckily for Constantine, he knows he doesn't have to worry about that. Therefore, he is playing an early defender due to the fact there's no threat of Damien/Stefan here.
A little bit of an interesting visual glitch we see on the screen there, with the resilience seem to be allowing the ground to carry over there.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that's coming from. I mean, no players have actually played any resilience this game, so that's quite strange.
The Gabor. The Gabor got played for
Oh,
resilience.
oh, right. But that's on the wrong side of the board, though. Interesting. Oh, is Constantine trying to get the high roll here? And does he hit it? He does not hit it. So that will stick. And now we do see the Vigo getting thought about to play down here. I imagine that Frailcoast does want to try boost these sergeants up as much as he can because they are very much in danger of dying. And what he's going to take, he's going to take a sergeant. He does take the sergeant. I guess the sergeant has more deployability
on that. Not allowing the sergeants to get the double buff from Vigo.
I guess it's quite greedy, but it has more potential. I mean, the thing is, Frailcoast isn't a very unfavorable position. He's getting a long round 3 against dwarfs that had carryover. I think he's trying to play for his outs and playing for absolutely max amount of points. Things can go wrong, and things can hit and kill the sergeant. But I think Frailcoast is basically saying to himself, "I need things to go my way for me to win this game, so I'm going to play for the max amount of potential points and play the second sergeant, or third sergeant rather."
Yeah. Does end up missing out on one potential deploy. And looking at his hand, he doesn't have a whole lot of deploys in there. Definitely more than average. Unfortunately, gets clapped by the RNG right there.
Yeah, Berserker not really having any of that sergeant and dealing with it quite efficiently, and I imagine Frailcoast is very unhappy about that. I mean, Constantine is already up by 20 points, and he hasn't even committed his lead again.
Boy, Tree gets played, takes out the Glynis.
Yeah, this is not looking very good for Frailcoast. This match is looking like the Dwarf player is absolutely running away with it because it seems like Frailcoast's list, without the Damien and Stefan not having the threats to quite answer this swarm well enough. And we do see diplomacy come down now, and it does buff the sergeant, so not bad value, but I mean, with a 25-point gap.
It puts 2 things on the board for that tourney Shalmar, like you were saying.
Yeah, that's not a bad diplomacy at all. So what would that diplomacy actually play for? They played for 5, 7, 8 plus another 4, 12-point diplomacy, basically, kind of. Not bad at all.
I don't know where any of those numbers came from, but I trust it.
5 points plus the 2 on the sergeant, so 7, and then plus another 1 with the diviner, 8, and then plus another 4 because of 2 bodies for Shalmar. So
I see.
12. But yeah, 12-point diplomacy. I don't know if you want to count as a 12-point diplomacy, or obviously that value is kind of coming from the Shalmar, but I mean, you get what I'm saying. Pretty good value of the diplomacy. But I mean, Frailcoast is down by so many points. Going to need a lot more of those to have a chance of winning this game with all the points that he is lacking here. I guess he can always check the bribery and, get his opponent's oak potentially. That might be able to put him back in the game, but I'm not even sure if that will be enough here.
Yeah, I don't even know if high rolling here is going to bail Frailcoast out.
Yeah, it definitely is a very uphill battle for him to take here. But yeah, he's down by 30 points now. Good Lord. That's a lot of points to make up. And we see the spheres come down now from 9 points, still down by 19. But I mean, it's not looking very good for Frailcoast. We still have the guards to come down, which are basically playing for like little mini oaks at this point. That's basically what the guards are doing right now.
Yeah, there is only one slot available on the front row, so only one of the guards is going to be able to fit in there. But still, all these dwarf tags with Zoltan and guards, and obviously that Tree and that Barclay that we just saw committed, getting it all of his cards so much value. It's super hard for Frailcoast to actually be able to compete here.
Interesting enough, if he's only got one spot left in the front row, it means is he either missing a guard or is he missing kind of space for both Zoltan and guard, unless Constantine is banking on his opponent, perhaps killing one of the units in the front row and opening up extra space for him. But otherwise, not enough space for both guard and Zoltan for the front row.
This tourney Shalmar is going to be very big. This tourney Shalmar is super massive with how much that these RNG creates are creating into all sorts of units that are getting spammed here. But still,
yeah,
he is down by a lot here.
We are going to see the tourney Shalmar come down now. Yeah, I'm quite curious how much the Shalmar's playing for. Is he playing? Okay, so he's going to go for the Yennefer first. Does he believe he's going to get more value with the Shalmar potentially? I really hope. I want to see the Shalmar value. to see it.
Yeah, the Shailmar is going to be big here. I hope he doesn't pass early.
Yeah, I want to see it too. But this is why I was wondering why he didn't play, because now, yeah,
Well, it does take out a Nilfgaard card.
Yeah, so it maybe doesn't really
But
matter.
it does open up space on the front row to allow J.Constantine to play that guard and that Zoltan. And 22! Oh my.
Not quite enough there, but actually much closer than I thought the game was going to be, considering he was down by 30 points. That's wow, 22.20 Shalmar. Holy moly.
Maybe
that puts 20 points Shawnee to shame.
True. Maybe the game becomes a lot closer if Frailcoast decides to play around J.Constantine's capability of putting both Zoltan and Guard on the melee row. Although I'm not sure. I think that matchup is still going the Dwarfs player way 100% of the time. But maybe, retrospectively, there was a line that was just a little bit better.
Yeah, that was a very close one considering how bad things look there.
And now we have a Ardle mirror here. Both of these are Yoink 5s. However, J.Constantine's does run...
Damien.
Yes.
Instead of Triss.
Yes.
Basically, Damien instead of Triss. Both players do run Tony Shalmar. The major difference in both these players' lists is the addition of Triss in Frailcoast and Damien in Constantine's list. What do you think about that difference? How do you think that's going to play out?
Well, I think Triss is a very interesting card, and it's definitely much safer. It's kind of like a mid-rangey sort of thing that's not super punishable. That seems to be what Frailcoast's plan here is, just try to point slam, essentially, whereas J.Constantine's list is definitely much more greedy, simply because of that Damien inclusion.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, it is punishable. So if Frailcoast is able to, punish that or prevent that from from getting good value, then it might give him the edge. Whereas if Constantine's able to get good value with his Damien, it might give him the edge. So I guess this game actually just might come down to whether or not Frailcoast can punish the Damien or not.
Yeah, and this yoink like cat or mouse game that ends up happening when Damiens or Stefans are in play in an Ardle mirror is super interesting and actually kind of complex. Most of the time what happens is the person that commits their yoink first usually ends up losing, and the person that commits their yoink second usually ends up getting that Damien or that Stefan to capitalize on.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very weird because as you mentioned, there's so many different ways you can punish your opponent. If one small misplay in this mirror and it's game over, because if you play just one card in the wrong order, the wrong sequencing, your opponent can punish you very, very hard. They can yoink your Damien and then play their own defender in one turn and do all kinds of things that can really just completely spell disaster for you. But yeah, it's a very, very you got to think about the matchup because it has so many ways it can go wrong, and just one small misplay and the game can be pretty much over.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And we do see this assimilate engine, the Artorias, get yoinked by Frailcoast. Still having his own Artorias there, maybe planning on capitalizing on these two current assimilate engines, and up to 4 even, if he decided to play this Diviner and Artorias of his own.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Constantine is getting a bit of value on the thinning, whereas Frailcoast is getting more engine power in round 1. But we do see both players not really committing a whole lot besides the Swears. And I mean, Frailcoast does pass here. He committed the Swears and takes a pass. That's a bit interesting. He did seem to have committed a bit more value than his opponent, but he still opts to take the pass. And so, how important do you think round control is in this matchup?
Well, I think it can be super interesting, and I imagine Constantine's super happy with having it here because at this point he can play that Damien as his second to last card, and even though it still can get controlled, it doesn't serve as a refresh for Frailcoast's side anymore, since he no longer has last say. The Damien doesn't have time to actually hit if Constantine does play its second to last card, and it does end up getting yoinked by Frailcoast.
Ooh, that Vanilla Elite is giving Frailcoast a lot of information about his opponent's hand. It comes down for just 4 points, meaning that Constantine has no tactics in hand. So that gives Frailcoast quite a bit of information about his opponent's hand. However, I just want to go back to what we saw in round one. It seems that Constantine's weakest card in hand, he dry passed with a hefty Helg. That is a very interesting card to be taking a dry pass with in round one. I guess the thought process is that the opponent always goes 20 shell, or not 20 shell, 20 jousted rather. So maybe it's not that valuable, but maybe it's also a tell considering the fact that he did play that Vanilla lead for only 4 points. It might be a tell that his hand is just full of gold units and he doesn't really have anything he wants to play instead.
Well, I think for the most part, tourney or the hefty Helge in this matchup is mostly just a thing that forces your opponent to hold on to a tourney joust. And while that definitely still has value, the hefty Helge in this matchup just doesn't serve as much of a threat for the most part. Only real thing that ends up happening is your opponent has to, when you haven't committed that tourney, or that, I keep saying tourney, that when you haven't committed that Helge yet, the tourney joust do have to or do end up being a much higher value and get held in the hand much more often.
Unless you have, if you have tactical advantage with it, then you can obviously get a stick in round one and get control of the game. However, you do open yourself up a bit to a Yennefer's Invocation then potentially.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And the good news for Frailcoast here is, like we were saying, Constantine may actually end up having that tourney joust and only have a 4-point card in hand, and actively choosing to hold on to it just because of that threat of Helge.
Yeah, that is definitely true. However, there are a bunch of ways you can actually, still have access to that 20 joust, but without actually having to keep the 20 joust. Something like Menno, for example, is a pretty good way of having access to 20 joust, but not actually having to keep 20 joust in hand. So that can be a very nice way to, have a safeguard against 20, Hefty Hulk without actually having to keep a direct counter to it in hand.
Yeah, that is definitely very true, but if you do end up having to commit that Menno into a tourney joust rather than something like a bribery, that most of the time is not going to end up feeling super great, but I do agree with you there.
So we do see both players playing a portal for their sergeants, and it looks like first say actually coming into play here. Frailcoast able to get the first say down with his portal, meaning he can develop his engines and obviously react to his opponent's engines, which is something we've seen very, very often in the past when it comes to like engine mirrors or any decks that run especially decks that run make use of portal. We've seen this a lot in Syndicate when Seductress were meta. First say when portal engines are a thing is quite important sometimes.
And we do see a early leader commit from Constantine here, knowing that he's going to potentially be able to get a second one, whereas Frailcoast is not going to be able to.
Both players using their leader abilities very, very early here. That's very, very interesting because now, I mean, Damien becomes a lot more potent. Damien has a very good chance of going through now with both players actually opting to play their leader abilities. And now we do see the 20 Shelmar come down from Constantine, perfectly killing that Glynis, dealing 7 damage, just enough to kill Glynis, and coming in for a lot of value here, trading up by 4 points basically to that Glynis. Really good value on the 20 Shelmar. But yeah, back to what we were speaking about with Damien. Damien is now going to be very, very scary for Frailcoast to deal with because he no longer has his leader ability to instantly deal with it as he would have if he kept the leader ability instead. What do you think about that use of Frailcoast or even both players' leader ability so early?
I think J.Constantine is understandably getting greedy here, given the fact that he has a more greedy list. However, Frailcoast does still have potential control here. He can Vigo into that Purify to be able to deal with a defender, as well as that Tourney Shalmar to be able to deal with that Damien, like we've been saying. So he does still have lines that are able to take out this Damien and deal with it just fine. So J.Constantine isn't in the clear quite yet, but Frailcoast's options of being able to take out this, or being able to take out this Damien have definitely been reduced.
Yeah, I mean, he can kill with the Tuning Shah, but I mean, you'd always prefer to just steal it for your own rather than just kill it. I mean, if you can, obviously, but it looks like he's opting to just deal with it rather with Tuning Shah, which means he has to keep this Tuning Shah till the very end, basically, in order to be able to deal with the Damien. Otherwise, Damien will go through, and if Damien goes through, it could spell disaster for Frailcoast.
Yeah, and like I was saying a little bit earlier, in one of the earlier rounds, since Constantine does have that last say, he's able to play that Damien second to last card, and Frailcoast is not actually able of taking advantage unless he wants to have a Zeal card somehow on his board. He's not able to actually take advantage of that that Damien for his own use if he was to steal it.
Unless he plays as a third to last card, then if it does get like double yoinked, it will still go off.
Yeah.
If he plays it third to last.
But obviously Constantine would have to actively play into that. And if that was the situation that we were in, I wouldn't imagine Constantine would choose to do so.
We do see a defender come down. It looks like Frailcoast didn't draw his own defender. I guess defenders in this matchup, they aren't really that valuable considering the fact that they almost always just get answered very easily with diviners. However, they still force an answer. That's the key. They still force you to keep a diviner or maybe some way to deal with it. But for the most part, they do almost always get answered. So whilst they might not be that valuable, they still force your opponent to maybe keep some suboptimal cards in their hand to deal with it, which can be somewhat valuable.
Yeah, especially if they have to start using things like a Yennefer's Invocation to be able to take it out, because that's one less thing that's able of taking out your greedy cards like the Damien and Stefan. But obviously we don't see that Stefan in this matchup, and we do see the Damien come down.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to get cleaned up very easily with the Tony Shalmar here. What exactly is this Roderick pulling? I guess he could pull a defender, but I imagine that Frailcoast is just going to deal with this Damien right here and now, which means that he is able to get control of this game. He's up by 13. He is down a card though, but I mean, it's looking pretty good for Frailcoast in this situation. But I mean, briberies can do all kinds of funny things in this mirror, and I mean, I don't think you can count either player out until both bribery rolls are at least finished.
Yeah, bribery definitely has some swing potential, obviously. But given the fact that the Damien is out of this game, and obviously Constantine can't roll one,
it's out of this game for now.
And it's out of the game for Constantine. It's not out of the game for Frailcoast quite yet.
Yeah.
But I would say Constantine's definitely on the back foot here. He needs to be able to make up some points for sure. And his capability of doing so is definitely a little bit lower than Frailcoast, simply because of Frailcoast's lack of greedy cards.
Yeah, and we do see a Suez come down here for 7 points. Not bad value. Also, well, I guess you could say 8 points considering the Diviner proc. But we still have yet to see the bribery come down from Frailcoast, and that can also find all kinds of things. It can find a Turi Shelma, which is pretty good. It can find a Damien, which could potentially be pretty good as well. If it does potentially find a Damien, how will Constantine deal with that Damien, I wonder? Is there actually a way you can deal with it?
I'm not entirely sure. My guess would be we see a forfeit come through, but
oh boy. Okay, so not quite a Damien, but he does have the options of Menno and Vigo. Menno only going to be able to wait. What's left in deck for Menno to even pull here?
Diplomacy to
diplomacy,
get that.
Okay.
Assimilate
Menno, diplomacy.
And deploy synergy.
Yeah, I guess that is his best option considering he doesn't run Duchess, so Vigo not quite as good. Ooh,
Gets Duchess off for the diplomacy.
Never mind. I guess that's pretty good. Yeah, with all the angels on board, this bribery actually playing for quite a few points.
Wow.
And it seems like J.Constantine had enough of that game and opting to just GG go next. That was quite a bribery.
Diplomacy. Who would have thought?
Bribery into diplomacy. Yeah,
all
quite
right,
the
into the Menno. I forgot about that. Forgot about that whole thing.
Yeah, bribery into Menno, into diplomacy, into Duchess, into a billion points.
Yeah, that was definitely interesting there. So here in this game 4, we see a Mystic Echo, which is the Harmony version on Frailcoast's side, versus an Ardle once again. Do you think Ardle has enough control to be able to reliably deal with this Harmony list?
So the thing is, it looks like Frailcoast is running cards that are more controllable. Things like Pavko and whatnot are not very good against Nilfgaard, as they have a lot of ways to just easily deal with it. So it depends a lot on the Harmony list, I believe. Some harmony lists are a bit less controllable, and you can get much more immediate value. And obviously, Dexit can be controlled, obviously much more susceptible to Nilfgaard. But a version like this with Pavko, I think, might be a little bit unfavored, but it depends on how you build the harmony list. But that being said, I think overall harmony it has a pretty decent amount of potential. It can do quite well against Nilfgaard if you play it very well. I think it is a very skill matchup. I think it comes down to a lot of how the players play it. I think it can go either way, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this matchup plays out because, as I mentioned, I think it does come a lot down to the player's skill.
And the defender gets instantly answered because it is Nilfgaard after all. And we do see that Berza come down super early, probably in an effort to not allow Constantine to steal that later on, just so that his engine gets to get him points rather than get Constantine points.
I think a very interesting play is, and we haven't really spoken about yet, is Frailcoast did decide to play the defender in round 1, which is somewhat unusual. However, against a deck that runs Damien, it can be very, very risky playing a defender later on in the game because the risk is if you play your defender, your opponent can potentially play their leader ability, steal your defender, and then play their own Damien down right next to it, and then you're unable to answer the defender and deal with the Damien in the same turn, which can actually just be a checkmate at that point and be game over. So it looks like Frailcoast is using the defender in round 1 rather, and understanding that it can be a liability to him later on. So he's rather making use of it now to get that value whilst he can.
I would definitely agree with that, especially when Nilfgaard even has additional answers to these defenders with these diviners. Defender just isn't super likely to be crazy good for you in this matchup, other than obviously the 8 points of tempo that it plays for.
Yeah, I mean it's still a good card. It's still 8 points tempo, and it can set up your Monroe, which it seems like Frailcoast does run. So the defender coming down now means he does have less ways of getting Monroe value later on. He still does have the Zoltan's Company, but outside the Zoltan's Company, and the Chariot, only one of Chariot, by the way. So with one Chariot and the Zoltan's Company, that is pretty much going to be the only ways you can get Monroe value now, which is very controllable if Constantine is allowed to get his hefty Hulk to stick, which will be able to quite easily ping off those rowdy dwarfs.
Yes, that's definitely true. And unlike the Nilfgaard mirror that we just recently saw, Helge is much more of a threat in this matchup since there's no tourney joust to just be able to easily deal with that Helge for Frailcoast here.
Yeah, and no locks either. Looking at Frailcoast's lineup. So Frailcoast doesn't have many good ways to deal with the hefty Hulk, which means that, if Constantine is allowed to develop a hefty Hulk, it could be very, very troublesome for Frailcoast to deal with.
And we see an early pass here, and Frailcoast has 3 points of engine value, or 3 points of unused value here. Only needs to play a 7-point card to catch up here. That is going to be a little bit of a problem for him. Maybe we see a Call of the Forest commit into something?
Yeah, he needs to do... He's getting 1 point here, so basically he needs to do an 7-point play off this Call of the Forest, and we'll see which... that tree would exactly do it if he wants to take the tree. So what's he going to take? Weeping Willow does exactly do it. How good is Weeping Willow matchup anyway? They have Purifies anyway. The poison might not actually do that much. I would honestly consider just taking the Weeping Willow here, considering the fact that, how much value are you actually expecting to get with poison?
Takes them in row, actually. That is aggressive there. Perhaps if you get 3 poisons, you expect one of them to get purified and 2 of them to go through. I could definitely see that sort of line of thought coming from Frailcoast, especially considering one of the purifies has already gone through.
Are you really going to want to keep all of that poison in round 3? That's the question.
Yeah.
It can be a liability. Keeping all those bronze cards for all that poison definitely might not be ideal. However, I think the thought process from Frailcoast's side might potentially be, this Monroe might actually struggle to find value. If I can't get these rowdy dwarfs to stick, which they might not be able to stick against a hefty Hulk, and might actually end up being a liability. However, he does have first say in this round, which means if he does open up with the rowdy dwarfs, I can't imagine how Constantine will be able to kill all of them anyway, but I guess he just wants to try and get poison value in this matchup. I think I see. You know what poison can actually do? Poison can threaten onto a defender. No, wait, never mind. Defender was played already. Never mind. I was gonna say poison you could utilize it on defender because you can't just purify it on a defender because of the fact that if you purify it, you're losing your defender tag. But considering the fact that the defender got played, that line of play doesn't really make much sense.
Yeah, but obviously I would, unless Constantine wants to skip out on the Impera Brigades from his Vigo, he's literally incapable of stopping a 3 poisons from getting at least 1 unit to die.
Yeah.
That still does require holding on to 2 5-point cards that have a Harmony tag, which, to be honest, Dryad Rangers are pretty okay by themselves, especially if they get a poison to go through, but they're definitely not ideal.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely would prefer to have some more golds in your hand in round 3 rather than keeping the Rangers. As good as they can be, generally speaking, you don't want to be keeping them over gold cards in round 3. We do see this Chariot come down, and that is going to, that whilst it does proc the Harmony, it does mean that Frailcoast will lose out on a Dwarf trigger potentially. Actually, well, looking at his hand, he doesn't actually have any dwarfs from hand, so he doesn't actually lose anything. But it is important to note, if you do play a Chariot, due to the fact that it does play 2 different tags on the board, it means that if hypothetically Frailcoast were to play a dwarf at this point, it wouldn't actually proc the Harmony due to the way the Harmony actually works with looking at the tags on the side of the board.
Yeah. What do you think about Chariots and Zoltan's company that don't actually play cards or play specific tags in so that they end up actually blocking potential Harmony? What do you think about those sort of cards?
Yeah, I mean, that's always something you got to keep in mind when you're playing Harmony. You got to try play the. It makes your sequencing very, very important. So generally speaking, you want to play dwarfs first before you play your Zoltan's company because that allows you to make use of the Harmony tags. That being said, that can also mean that you delay potential engines with things like Monroe potentially. So there's a lot of considerations, a lot of thinking has to be involved with trying to figure out which sequencing to make use of to try get the most value out of your engines and not lose out on value, which can be very difficult to sequence correctly because a lot of considerations that have to be made and sometimes a little bit of sacrifice have to be made to try find the most value depending on the matchup.
And we do see that Helge come down, and we did say that this is definitely a big threat for Frailcoast here. He doesn't have a very easy way of dealing with this shield and the 4-point body that this Helge has. So I imagine he's pretty happy to see that come down in this round 2, where he doesn't actually have to take this round.
Yeah, and that's interesting enough. If Frailcoast does decide to take a pass here, he is up a lot of points. And how is Constantine? Yeah, how is Constantine going to do these points in one? He's got 2 points basically in the bank with the hefty Hulk, so he's basically sitting on 6 points. He has to do a 12-point play here. Menno into bribery. Oh, wow.
I think that'll do it.
Oh boy.
That'll do it by 1 point. That's very close.
Relying on the good old create to take the round. That was a very big balls play there from Constantine. Relying on the bribery to take the round there. Oh boy.
Yeah, I think there's only a couple things in Frailcoast deck that actually work off of that bribery. Tree and Defender are examples. He needs exactly 8 points to be able to take that.
Yeah, I think it was only those 2. I'm looking at the line right now. Those are the only 2 cards. That was one of the 2 only ways. Yeah, that was it. There was only 2 ways. Oh boy. And Frailcoast now a very bronze heavy hand. He does. I mean, there's not much gold left in his deck besides figures, but I mean, Constantine still has quite a few golds left, and that engine combo with the portal is going to be very, very difficult for Frailcoast to deal with as he doesn't have much control, and that's going to be a lot of points that I'm not sure how Frailcoast is going to deal with it.
And we do only see 2 poisons in Frailcoast's hand here, so that does open himself up to be able to get that purified. I'm curious to see if Constantine decides to greed that purify that he could potentially have in hand and play it early for that assimilate value, or if he's holding it, planning to play around poison potentially from Frailcoast's side.
Yeah, I mean, these bronzes are obviously going to be quite a liability here. However, that being said, that Panther will be able to kill that Sergeant next turn unless Constantine is able to double proc it, which I'm not sure if he's going to be able to do considering he's already played the Vigo. So I think that Sergeant will at least die next turn. So likely to see, another threat. Not a deploy, so it doesn't proc the Sergeants, but it is a 1 point per turn engine. that I don't think that Frailcoat's going to be able to deal with unless he can poison it, I suppose. But then he might potentially lose out in value on the not killing the sergeant. It looks like he's going to go kill the sergeant immediately and then start working on it.
Do you think that Frailcoast, he's kind of having this conundrum here where he doesn't know whether or not to play greedy for this harmony value or to try to play around this potential assimilate purify that J.Constantine could have? He's kind of ending up at this fork in the road. Do you think Frailcoast has to play sort of greedy here, given the hand that he has, and try to get this poison down early to get that harmony value? Obviously, that's not what he chose to do, but what do you think?
There is a way to do it without play. If Constantine played his invocation, what Frailcoat could have done there is he could have played leader onto Call the Forest onto Percival, and that is just as good value-wise as double fledgling because it gets 2 points per harmony trigger, which means it's exactly the same as both fledglings, and it's very hard to kill as well because it's got 3 armor. And what you can do is you can play leader into Call the Forest onto the Percival and then play something else. It gets to 6. They can't leader it. The only way they can deal with it basically is with invocation. So if invocation wasn't in play here, I would very much consider actually potentially a line of play where you play your leader into Call the Forest into Percival rather than Waters, as it's much harder to control Percival than it is to control the Waters if you know your opponent's already played their Tall Punish.
And it looks like we see a little bit of a sort of like wimpy early commit that didn't go like full on early, but still ends up getting countered. I think Frailcoast did eventually realize here that he does need to kind of play greedy here. And needs to go for this harmony value to have a chance at winning. But he didn't realize it quite soon enough, and in the end, it doesn't actually ever end up mattering, given the fact that Constantine was playing around it with this assimilate engine.
Yeah, I think this game really was round 2 where this game kind of fell apart because, I mean, while Frailcoat did bleed round 2, he didn't have enough harmony tags to make a very efficient bleed. I mean, he did bleed. He got a good pass. I mean, it was very difficult for Constantine to have to make that, to get that gap, but he was actually able to take that gap with the bribery, which is a very efficient way to deal with it. And here we do see the Damien and Frailcoat obviously having no real way to deal with that.
No, he can do actually, Waters into Tree.
Yes, I guess that is true. Waters into Tree does deal with that. Actually, yeah, that's pretty good. But is it going to be enough? There's a point gap is very, very big. Was he planning on using this? He does. Okay.
For Call of the Forest instead, is there something that spawns 2 units here? Goes for the Dryad Ranger to get poison to go through.
Is that worth more than Waters?
I'm not sure.
Pretty sure. I don't feel like doing maths. But it doesn't really matter at this point. I think this game is pretty much over no matter which way you do it. But that was a very interesting choice there. But yeah, that bribery, I'm not sure how much that impacted the game. Giving if
well, it is a whole card.
Yeah, a whole card does mean you can sequence things very differently with double final say. But yeah, that round 2 end up not going Frailcoat's way with the fact that Constantine was able to take it quite efficiently with an 8 provision card there.
Yeah, very unfortunate round 2 for Constantine there to have for Frailcoast there to have Constantine high roll one of the 2 options that he needs to off of that bribery. Need a whole card.
This is going to be spooky. We do see a Death Wish, or Death Shadow rather, versus Harmony, and this Harmony list does not run a Dragoon, meaning that Caltulus is going to be a very, very big threat for Frailcoat to deal with. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, with no movement in this Harmony list.
Movement or lock doesn't exist for
Caltulus becomes a massive threat, and this is definitely going to be a game of round 2 here. It's going to be a sort of game of cat and mouse. How does Frailcoast go about not losing card advantage and at the same time getting very crucial combo pieces like that Caltulus out to allow him to actually have a somewhat close to favorable round 3.
And we see an early Waters commit into a early Maruna commit. So both players committing pretty important cards here. If it is very important to note that Frailcoat absolutely needs to win this round, because if he's not able to win this round, I cannot imagine how he's going to deal with the Caltulus in a long run. I mean, I guess he's got poison to potentially poison the Cultulus, but the thing is, poison it takes 2 turns to work, meaning that the Cultulus value can already come down for quite a few points before it's even able to get answered, which can be very, very scary for Constantine. I mean, for Frailcoast here.
What would you think about taking that Dwarven Skirmisher there and taking out the Maruna and just sacrificing your 2-point Dwarven Skirmisher to give that Death Wish rather than yoinking a 4, just yoinking a 2? What would you think about that?
I mean, it depends on how much value you think this Maruna is going to get outside of this. I mean, he does have some 3-point cards to play, and I guess it can still go for quite a few points, but that Lava is also going to go for quite a few points if left for an answer. So I'm not actually sure. It depends on how much value he expects to give this Maruna here. And the Maruna does end up taking a 3, so it was a 6-point Death Wish there. Although that hypothetically, depending on the list, would actually re-enable a harmony tag for him, but obviously with this list, only 1 Chariot means it doesn't really make a difference here. And we do see a Panther coming down, not for bleed though, just playing it for the 5 points. Not bad value, but I mean, I guess he doesn't want to open himself up to his opponents eating the bleed card potentially.
Yeah, that would definitely be my guess, considering that Constantine does have additional deploy consumes in the form of an Andrega Warrior, and bleeding something like that Andrega Warrior, which does have the Insectoid tag, would definitely not be super great if that was the cards that he did have. But we do see lots and lots of commitment coming down in this round 1, because both players understand that if they win this round, they allow themselves to have a win condition. If Constantine wins, he kind of just wins the game. If Frailcoast wins, he doesn't lose yet.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that Cultulus is obviously a massive, massive problem. Both players understand the value of Cultulus in this matchup, and both players are trying to get round control here to best utilize that Cultulus value or mitigate that Cultulus value, depending on which side you want to look at it from. But yeah, that Cultulus is going to be a big, big threat, and both players are trying to utilize or exploit or prevent that from happening.
And yeah, that is why we see all sorts of commitment coming down on both sides. Barnabas being probably the most committal piece so far here. And we do eventually see Frailcoast getting this round, allowing him to bleed, and potentially allowing himself to get Kelly out.
This is a very interesting situation because on the one hand, you don't really want to be bleeding a Death Shadow deck due to the fact that the leader ability refreshes every round. And when you are playing into round 2, you are basically giving them free leader value, or bad mulligans there coming in from Frailcoast. Not what you're hoping to find. But back to what we were saying, the thing is, if you don't bleed, you open up yourself to all kinds of problems with Cultulus. But if you do bleed, you potentially go card down, and
we see a dry pass here. Maybe just betting that J.Constantine is either going to have a secondary Royal Decree target, or that you're going to be able to poison?
I guess he's just going to bank on the poison. But as you mentioned, even with poison, they're still going to come down for a lot of points. Unless maybe perhaps Frailcoast's line of sequencing, he's maybe going to say to himself, I'm not going to play for maximum harmony value. I'm going to try put as little units as I can on my side of the board and try, mitigate the Cultulus value. And then when the Cultulus value does come down, I'll deal the Cultulus with the poison, and then I'll play my harmony cards like Call of the Forest, or not Call of the Forest, with Waters. But then we have this whole game of cat and mouse, where maybe then Constantine might hold on to his Cultulus much longer, meaning that by that point where Frailcoast does play the Waters, there'll be so many tags on the board that he might get so little value with the Waters that it might actually not be worth at that point.
Or maybe Constantine just misses the Kelly altogether, and you can see Frailcoast get greedy and stupid, and maybe it'll pay off for him. Or
maybe
he might play around a card that doesn't exist, and it'll feel bad for him.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways this game can go. Oops, sorry, my mic just cut out. Sorry about that. There's so many ways that you can play around things. And I mean, the thing is, by playing around those things, you can lose so much value, but you can also gain so much value if you play around it correctly. So there's going to be a lot of considerations here. I'm very, very curious to see how this game plays out, because there's so many sequencing situations where this can either go horribly right or horribly wrong. We do see a early defender come down, not using his leader ability, And just to see why didn't he use leader bullets there, because if he did get the harmony down, he's not playing worse to Cultulus. The 2-point cards are just dying anyway, but he's losing on some harmony value though. I'm not 100% sure about this sequencing. What do you think about that?
Maybe with the plan of grabbing an additional Call of the Forest rather than a Waters here, perhaps later into the round. I'm not sure what his target would be there, but assuming he is going to hit Call, I'm not entirely sure.
If he is going for Call, I guess the target for it is Percival. Percival is still pretty good.
And we do see that Kelly.
Okay, this game is going a bit unexpectedly. I was expecting both players to try to take different lines of play here, but both players playing it fairly just standardly, playing straight into Kelly and / Kelly's playing straight into Poison. So both players giving each other value and just taking the trades early on here.
Will we see a Poison consume here?
I would definitely consider, if you are Constantine, I would definitely consider taking that consumption. I mean, you still get value of the Poison. You're forcing your opponent to consume their own engine. So although you might not get the insane value that you're hoping for, it's still good value on the Poison, even if the Cultulus gets answered here. Are we going to see the consumption?
Yeah, we do see that Kelly consume.
Okay, so the Cultulus does get consumed, which means it's not answered. But that being said, the Poison still got some value, forcing the opponent to, consume their own engine.
And it looks like Frailcoast was floating his leader ability there. Maybe he's planning on playing it?
He's used leader ability.
Frailcoast? No, I was talking about Frailcoast.
My bad. Yeah. I'm not sure why they're using his leader ability. It's kind of strange. Unless he's planning on using Call of the Forest. What exactly are his options with Call of the Forest? Look, it's Percival. It's pretty much just Percival. So unless he's planning on taking a Percival, I mean, I guess there's no rush just yet. He's not playing anything else besides dwarfs right now, so he's not losing out on harmony value just yet. So I guess there's not really a rush for him to put it down. I don't think there's a downside of putting it down right now, but there's no rush to either. So I guess that's the idea.
What that dwarf does end up getting burned, and we see Frailcoast playing down this 2-point berserker now. Was trying to play around this low unit punish in that Manticore by waiting for that to eventually get consumed, so that there wasn't a chance that this berserker ends up getting taken out instead of that skirmisher. Pretty good play.
Although he did lose out on he didn't lose out on a point. Actually, it's exactly enough that's going to use up all the armor. But yeah, as you mentioned, pretty good play there, playing around the so just the Monroe coming down for 7 points. Not exactly ideal value there, but at this point, not really much you can do when the Rowdy Dwarf does end up dying. Sorry, Rowdy Dwarfs.
I am curious. I really still am quite curious what this leader ability is going to end up doing. Maybe he just...
he's got 2 tags left, so it's still a 12-point leader with these tags in hand. I don't see Percival being more than 12 points, so I think Oak coming down to deal with what exactly? Why early Oak?
Yeah, I'm not sure why he would early Oak. Maybe... I'm surprised to not see potentially taking advantage of this harmony on the Weeping Willow. Or maybe his plan is to go for poison with this Weeping Willow. Does he still have access to a Dryad Ranger?
Oh, wait, that might be it. Yes, you could be right about that. If that is the case, that is then very correct for Frailcoast. Is he playing the Ida for because he plays Ida, he loses his option to deal with the defender, right?
And that would explain why I was thinking about the tree right there as well.
Ida coming down early like this means that he does open himself up to a defender from his opponent now, being able to block. There it is, meaning that the opponent's, oh boy, and now Constantine able to just, hide behind this defender. That could very well actually be a game deciding decision there. Not being able to answer this defender means that now he's unable to do the whole poison onto the big Karen strategy that I think he was initially going to hope for. What do you think about that one?
Yeah, I mean, that really explains why he was thinking about that Great Oak there. That's why that we got confused about it. But if he did sequence that Great Oak first, even though it did look kind of weird, it would have actually allowed him to punish a taller unit here.
Yeah, much taller units. I mean, that could very much be the difference here. If his last card of the opponent is Oswald, I think Frailcoast still has, even if against Oswald, Goliath, Frailcoast still has it. That was, I mean, boy, that was an interesting one over there. But Oak, obviously, the crazy card that is able to just give you such an insane amount of points as a finisher that he does end up taking this series.
Yeah, congratulations, Frailcoast. That was a super interesting last game. Lots of considerations
Yeah.
to be taken into account there. And even though it didn't exactly seem like it was going to end up working out super well for him, Frailcoast does maintain his composure and is able to actually take advantage of his various cards there and sequence correctly to go on to win that game. So,
That
congratulations,
was a very
Frailcoast.
interesting series.
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
Congratulations,
both players,
Frailcoast.
all those games very, very interesting. So, yeah, well done to Frailcoast, and look forward to seeing any future games from both players.